what are Astamatrikas? Astamatrikas, Asta meaning 8, and Matrika, you can translate it as mother. It actually also refers to the consonants and vowels. It can have many meanings as well in Sanskrit. Yeah, we have a Sanskrit scholar here, so he can probably tell more. But Astamatrika, in this context, refers to the 8 mother goddesses who are prevalent in both Buddha Dharma and other like non-Buddhist like Hindu Dharma practices as well. And they are present all over in Nepal as well as in India, and especially in Nepal's context, within the Newari like context, for both like Newari Hindus and Buddhists, we have like Astamatrika goddesses being worshipped and made offerings to throughout the Nepali Newari like community. And this is done by both like Newari Hindus as well as Newari Buddhists. And right now, today we are going to make a trip to the 6 out of the 8 Astamatrika like pilgrimages in the Kathmandu city. And why are we doing only to the 6? Because the 2 of them actually they are within like the restricted zones. One is within the Naranyati area, which we are not allowed to enter, and another is in the Bhadrakali like army barrack, and the other one within the Narayani is also within the army quarters. So which actually tells a lot about it, because these matrikas are the fierce like goddesses, right? So therefore like around so they are like very much worshipped by the army force, for example, and that's what it relates to. And that is why I suppose they decided to build these army quarters around these temples as well, so as to receive the blessings of the Astamatrikas. And Astamatrikas are generally like in more like traditional setting before perhaps they became like Buddhists or Hindus. In the history that we know, they were like they are the goddesses who you find in like charnel grounds, and people made like animal sacrifice to them, and they are considered as like blood drinkers. So very like feral in nature. That's their nature. It represents like fiercity aspect of the feminine. And of the 8 sets, it's not always that the same deity is like talked about or explained or categorized or conceptualized within these 8 sets. So over here, like if we come over here, starting from here, we have like, and generally these are presented in this order. We have the Brahmayani, the Rudrayani, and I will tell about each of these in more details again. Just a summary of what we are going to do today. So Kumari, and then we have Narayani, whose another name is like Vaishnavi, right? So that's related to Vishnu. And we have a Buddha in the middle. So this place was definitely built by the Buddhist Newari community rather than the Hindu Newari community, right? Because there is a Buddha in the middle. And then we have a Barahi, we have Indrayani, Samunda, and then we have Mahalakshmi, and we have Begrini. So that's not in the 8 matrikas, but we have Begrini and Simini over there. So Begrini is the head of tiger, one who has the head of tiger. Simini, one who has the head of like lion. And both of these, like Simini and Begrini, they are generally present as external protectors or as in the retinue of like devis, like goddesses. So for example, if you go to Vijayaswari, if you go to Sakhu Vajrayogini, if you go to the Farping Vajrayogini, so all of them, in all of these places, they are like located. So as you can perhaps like tell from the names of these 8 matrikas, right, you can very much tell that they are related to the major like deities that are worshipped in Hinduism and are also accepted within the Buddhist pantheon, perhaps as Dharampalas or as depending on the tradition, right? Depending on the Buddhist tradition as well. So they come from the 5 major deities, like all of the 8. So one is the Rudra or Shiva, and another is Vishnu, another is like Brahma, another is Indra, and another is Kumara. So from these like 5 major deities, like these are supposed to have arisen. And there are like other like Hindu stories as well as Hindu mythologies where the sets of 8s come from like other gods. Like for example, in the older version of Devi Mahatmya, it is described that they come from the bodies of these 5 deities, but in the latter version it describes how it comes from Durga only. And in other like Puranas like the Matsya Purana, Baraha Purana, depending on which Purana or which tradition may follow, they are supposed to have arisen from like different deities. So for example, one story tells like how all of these 8 come from like Shiva's sweat. So nonetheless, relating to the more acceptable and more commonly accepted story about them originating from the 5 major deities, from Rudra comes Rudrayani or Maheshwari, from Vishnu comes Vaishnavi, over here it's Narayani, from Vishnu also comes Varahi, related to the third incarnation of Vishnu, right? And from Vishnu also comes Mahalakshmi, right? And then instead of Mahalakshmi, in some of the contexts, they present Narasimhi, coming from Narasimha, which is another incarnation of Vishnu. And from Kumar, or that's the son of Shiva and Parvati, right? The eldest son comes Kaumari. And from Indra comes Indrayani. And I think, did I cover everything? And from Brahma comes Brahmayani, right? And that's generally presented over the first, in the first of these 8 sets, typically, I guess sort of representing the commonly accepted belief that Brahma is the creator, right? And whether be it in like Hinduism or in Buddhism, that is how it is accepted, of course, with other different subtle interpretations, but that is how they are conceptualized. And in the Newari Buddhist traditions, right? So these 8 matrikas, instead of coming from the bodies of these different deities, they are aroused by the siddhas of the past, and especially the Buddhist siddhas of the past. So anyone who has received a proper practice regarding them, so after they are generally, I guess, possibly based on practices of higher deities, right? So higher Anuttara Tantra deities, or other kinds of more advanced practices. So based on the practice of higher deities, then, and after practicing the creation stage, perhaps this is what I was told by a Newari Buddhist lineage holder, is that based on that practice, then the siddhas are able to invoke and establish and request all of these 8 matrikas. And depending on what kind of what the purpose of this purpose of the creation is, these Buddhist masters, as well as I guess the Hindu Tantra masters, are able to invoke and bring into being all different kinds of beings. But the 8 matrikas themselves are particularly those that were brought over, and then for whose end or whose dissolution they didn't really think about it, or we don't really have that, at least in near proximity in terms of timing, because they have been protecting this place for generations, for centuries, at least 1,000 years. So their end at least is not that near, and perhaps hopefully as long as the valley exists, as long as people in the valley exist, they will be here. So I guess one interesting thing, out of all these different stories, people tend to be confused by all these different stories about the origin as well. But the essential point is that and especially for Tantra practitioners, perhaps either in the Hindu tradition or Buddhist tradition, is that they can be invoked and brought into being and requested for specific purposes. And for me personally, at least that is the essence. And let me see if I have more things to say. Oh yes, so I'll just tell the names, the Newari names as well, just for documentation purposes. And as we go into each of these matrika places, and I will describe as much I have learned, as much as I know about these places, right? So first, there is the Pasiko Ajima, which is the Brahmayani, and there is Nai Ajima, which is Rudrayani, Chandra Lakhu Ajima, Mahalakshmi, Lumadi Ajima, Vaishnavi, Panga Ajima, Barahi, Luti Ajima, Indrayani, Samma Ajima, Chamunda, Fibbo Ajima, Kaumari. And the places that are inaccessible today are the Fibbo Ajima, and another is the Chandra Lakhu Ajima. So these 2 places we are not going to be able to attend today. So the Mahalakshmi and the Kaumari. It's Fibbo Ajima. Mahalakshmi and Kaumari. These 2 places we won't be able to visit, but the other 6 will visit. Okay.